Gandhiji, or Bapu, as we fondly call him, not only inspired India as a nation but the entire world. Today we have Mr. Per Andersson with us. He is a Swedish author, travel journalist, and an avid Gandhi follower. He has traveled to India many times, and not only that, he has also authored books on India. Please welcome him to talk on what Gandhi means to him.
Hello, everyone, and good evening, all highly honored dignitaries. I'm so happy to be here to speak to you about Mahatma Gandhi in a personal way. I am a writer and a travel editor of a magazine called Vagabond, which I actually was one of the founders of back in 1987. And since early 1980s, actually, I have been traveling to India almost every year. I think it's one of the most exciting, energetic, and also beautiful countries of the world. I have to say that. It's my truly opinion. My love for India has also resulted in hundreds of travel stories, mainly for Vagabond magazine, but also a kind of historical and cultural documentary shown in cinema halls around Stockholm, and as well in several radio shows. And not to be forgotten, a book based on a true story. It is called The Amazing Story of the Man Who Cycled from India to Europe for Love. It's a very, very long title, but it was also a very long journey for the protagonist of the story himself, Mr. P.K. Mahanandiya from Odisha, who himself actually is a very strong believer in Mahatma Gandhi's message of love and methods of non-violence, ahimsa. When I think of Mahatma Gandhi, I think of how he used to go on hunger strike and urge his countrymen to passively resist the colonial rule in order to get through their demands. I think of how Gandhi stopped eating in order to stop the violence between Hindus, Sikhs and Muslims in connection with India's independence in 1947. I think of the moment when the British introduced the salt tax and Mahatma Gandhi and his followers back in 1930 responded by carrying out the Salt March itself. Together they walked more than 400 kilometers to the coast of Gujarat to defy the government monopoly and to symbolically produce salt from the sea. I am also thinking of the spinning wheel, of course, which is maybe the most typical symbol of Mahatma Gandhi when it comes to concrete things. Gandhi used several easy to understand symbols to unite the often at that time illiterate people against the British. Of the hand spinning garments which Gandhi liked to use and which symbolized that he wanted to break the imperialist pattern of trade. I'm thinking about that, and that pattern of trade meant that Indians sold cotton of usually a low profit to England, where the spinning, weaving, and sewing were done on a large scale and mechanically for a greater profit, which was not a very good system for the Indians. And I'm thinking of that domestic hand-woven fabric, the so-called khadi, still is used by so many Indian politicians and others who want to get somewhere in the Indian society, especially politics maybe. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, who eventually became known to the world as Mahatma, successfully promoted the principle of ahimsa. And I'm so interested in that word. The ancient Indian principle of non-violence. In Gandhi's interpretation, it was useful in the non-violent resistance against the British, of course. The movement which was called Satyagraha, which had an immense impact on India, impressed public opinion in Western countries, and influenced the leaders of various civil rights movements all around the world. I'm thinking especially about Martin Luther King in the United States, just to take one example. In Gandhi's thought, ahimsa precludes not only the act of inflicting a physical injury, but also a mental state like evil thoughts and hatred, unkind behavior, and lying, of course. Gandhi believed ahimsa to be a creative energy force and is to be found in all religions, in Hinduism as well as in Christianity and Islam. Gandhi said, actually, here is a quote, "Non-violence is common to all religions, but it has found the highest expression and application in Hinduism." And he continued, "I do not regard Jainism or Buddhism as separate from Hinduism." So he actually meant all those three way of thinking and religions. But how much is the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi really worth today? When I take a look at the world that surrounds us, it may seem like Mahatma Gandhi's ideas only survive in political speeches and symbolic gestures. Gandhi was a revolutionary on several levels. He wanted to drive out the British, create a self-sufficient society, abolish actually property protection in favor of a collective community, and of course make different religious believers stop arguing and try to understand that they all pray to the same divinity. He challenged narrowness and group affiliation, and with the same conviction that he combated colonial empires, he also combated wrong thinking, violent thinking all around India and the world. From the early years in South Africa, Mahatma Gandhi went through a gradual transformation, or perhaps one should say development, from a traditional and quite shy, actually, lawyer via an angry anti-racist activist to a religious thinker and a critic of civilization. And finally, he came out as a political visionary and a saint. And as such, I think he still plays a tremendous role in the world of today, soon 73 years after he was killed in New Delhi that unfortunate day in January 1948. And yes, his legacy is still alive, I think. His vision lives in many contemporary activists who fight for a good cause. I'm thinking of Greta Thunberg, the Swedish young woman who tries to stop climate change. And I'm thinking of the people of Belarus, actually, no one mentioned, no one forgotten, who try to stop their president and his brutal police force from destroying their nation and the democracy. And I'm thinking of many others around the world, among them many idealistic social workers in India itself. All those unknown but dedicated people operating for social and political change who are mostly unheard in the international media and even in the Indian media sometimes. Ever since the 1980s, when I was engaged in the Swedish Peace and Arbitration Society, which is Sweden's oldest peace organization actually, with roots back to 1883, I am convinced it is possible to change the world without violence. It works, it has to work, because there is no alternative. It can't exist any alternative. Because the opposite, which is violence, cruelty, and finally death, actually, only strikes back at the activists themselves and make them lose in respect and reputation. Actually, I am convinced that anyone who uses violent methods to achieve their political goals will one day be questioned and defined. Only if we act as the great soul, only if we try to think like Mahatma Gandhi did a century ago, we can create a better world. And so, thank you for listening to me, and may God, regardless of what you call him or her or it, bless you.